Bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the press conference for Only Lovers Left Alive. And I will introduce the people, if you would be so kindly. Thank you. And I'll introduce the people who are sitting here with us today. At my far left, he's come to Cannes so often that he's practically has dual citizenship. A few films that come to mind: Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence in 1983, Lost Emperor, his work with Cronenberg, Dangerous Method. His filmography is a mile long. Mr. Jeremy Thomas. His filmography may be slightly shorter, but no less demanding. If you think of Samsara, Winged Migration, and Aki Kaurismäki's Le Havre, the other producer, Mr. Reinhard Brunding. He's come to Cannes for the longest time, but not nearly often enough. Two films that may come to mind, Midnight Express and Heaven's Gate. Welcome back, Mr. John Hurt. Light years from the parts he played in Thor, Midnight in Paris, Deep Blue Sea, War Horse, not to mention The Avengers, and that's only in 1 year. As Adam, Mr. Tom Hiddleston. As Eve, the Vampira Prima, the constantly surprising and always amazing Tilda Swinton. Camera d'Or in 1984 for Stranger Than Paradise. Best artistic contribution for Mystery Train. Palme d'Or for shorts for Coffee and Cigarettes, 3. Grand Prix du Jury for Broken Flowers, director Jim Jarmusch. And the question goes to you, Mr. Jarmusch. First question goes to you.
We didn't introduce Tom Hiddleston.
What do you mean I didn't?
You did?
Where were you?
Oh, I was outside there.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Henri.
No, pas de prob.
It's because it went on so long. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, he is here. Okay.
Everybody was sort of surprised when rumor came out that you were going to do a vampire movie. And they went, some went, excuse me, and the others went, what else is new? What made you decide to go for this kind of project?
Well, we heard you could make a lot of money with these kind of things. I don't know. It's a project. It's a thing I wanted to make a love story with vampires, and it's something that took maybe 7 years to actually make this film. And so it was kind of a long process. I haven't really seen any of these current sort of commercial vampire films, but I have a love for the whole history of vampire films, many beautiful films. And so actually, you know, it started, Tilda and I were talking about this, and I had a script 7 years ago. And shortly after that, there was a character for John Hurt, and somehow they stayed with this project the whole time. And it was very difficult to do it. So, but Tilda would never give up. When things would fall apart, she would always say, that means it's not the right time for us to make the film. That's a good thing. So I wasn't sure if that was a good thing, but I think in the end it was, because here we are.
You want to comment on that?
But John and Tilda really stuck by this project always. And John Hurt said, you just tell me when we're going to do it and I'll be there. And he was. So I'm just very grateful. But I wanted to say one thing. Sorry, I don't want to talk so much, but
oh, you will.
The press, the people here, you're the first people that have seen our film. And our cast and crew haven't seen the finished film. So it's like our child. So we are very happy that you are here and that you saw our film. So thank you for that.
A quick question to John Hurt before the gentleman takes over. Was your character always named Christopher Marlowe, and did you have a chuckle when you discovered it was?
Yes, it was always called Marlowe, definitely. I had never taken the whole kind of Shakespearean business of writing, who the authorship. I hadn't really taken it that seriously until Jim came to have some lunch in my place in Norfolk. And we had a long talk about Marlowe, about Shakespeare, about the authorship and so on, and how important authorship is. I don't quite know how it necessarily fitted into the film, but it did in Jim's mind, and that is what you do with Jim. You go with the mind, and you go with enormous trust, because that's the way it is. Isn't that right? I think, yes. And so I personally think that Jim always wanted Marlowe to be alive. He wanted him to have the credit. And if you're going to make somebody live a long time dangerously, make them a vampire.
Question here, then the lady over there, then the lady here.
Hi, it's Rodrigo Fonseca from O Globo in Brazil. Jim, I would like you to tell us a few words about your work with Afonso Gonçalves, your editor. That's a Brazilian editor.
Yes, I had the great pleasure to work with Afonso Gonçalves, fantastic editor, and we really, I don't know, we met, we talked, and we decided to work together, and we just, I don't know, we understood each other very, very fast. So we worked together every day, working in the editing room, but Afonso really brought a kind of visual music to this film, and he is really remarkable. And the different types of different films that he has cut are a kind of astounding, the differences of them. So it was really something fantastic. I love working with him. I hope to work with him again.
Question over there.
Yes, Anna Taršić from Serbian Weekly Nin. Your vampires are rock musicians, pretty depressed, which is somehow their natural state, but also has to do, I guess, something with the state of the world. Are rock musicians so the only bohemians left? And the second question is about...
The only what?
Bohemians.
Bohemians.
Bohemians left. The second question is about outsiders. This movie is praising great figures in literature, science, and music, but also outsiders, which are very important, like Tesla. So I cannot avoid the question, does it has to do something with your Serbian connections?
Well, you know, it's difficult for me to answer these questions, I have to say, and I want to be gracious, but I also have to prepare myself, or maybe the press, that I am not very comfortable talking about this film for reasons that I think the answers are in the film. And so I really want this film to speak for itself. I don't want to demystify it by, I don't know, trying to analyze it or dissect it, or why did we do this, or what does this mean. I'm not sure I know what things mean in the film. But the things you just said, all of them are of interest to me. Outsiders, the idea of non-mainstream rock musician that Adam is, their appreciation for science and literature and all these gifts that humans, that they, in a kind of snobbish way, call zombies. But that's because they're frustrated with humans and saddened by a lot of things they do. But all of this is in the film. So, yes, outsiders, depression, Serbia, Tesla. I don't know. It's in the film. I don't know how to talk about it, really. forgive me, but I talk too much, I think.
At which point did the two producers come on board? Jeremy? Reinhard?
I've read the script 7 years ago, I think, and I loved it. And we always try to find a way to put it together. And I thought it's perfect for a European film, and because a lot of the shooting takes place in interiors, so it was perfect to shoot on stage in a studio. The only thing was to convince Jim to shoot in a studio. He never did it before, and because his films are very much influenced by the locations, to shoot on original places. But I think finally he was convinced. He had the freedom to shoot, and I think the set design is fantastic in the film. So yeah, we worked more or less 7 years on putting this together.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, the film was really, to me, shot in Detroit and Tangier, and that's where the time and space takes. And I was happy to join this film and work with my friends, and it was a very enjoyable experience with plenty of travel for me.
Sir?
Yeah. Jim, hello, this is Ninos Mikelidis from Greece. I would like to know why the choice of Tangier, and also could you comment on the visual style, which was really excellent, and what was the inspiration for that atmosphere that you created?
Well, the reasons for Tangier and Detroit are a little abstract for me. They are two places that are very emotionally attractive to me. I'm very drawn to them for very different reasons. But again, I don't know how to analyze why, but they just seemed appropriate or interesting to me. And the visual side of the film is a really strong collaboration with Yorick Lasso, who shot the film, who I had not worked with before, who is incredible. And something we found with each other that was really inspiring to me, that we sort of think we become one mind, or I don't know how to explain that either, but something fantastic from Yorick Lasso, and I call him Yorick Laslo. But and also Marco Bittner-Rosa, the production designer, an amazing person to collaborate with. Wow, I just feel so lucky. And also, for me, although there aren't a lot of characters in the film, clothing and style is very, very essential as details. And Bina Degler, who I worked with before on The Limits of Control, did the wardrobe design. So she also, these are just such amazing collaborators. And of course, you know, we mentioned Afonso, the editor, which has a sense of the music of the film as well. So, wow, all of these people to get to collaborate with was just really fantastic for me. And also, these producers were fantastic. These are not, they just went way out of their way to try to make this film possible. And they did, you know, they really jumped through a lot of hoops to make this thing work. So they were really so supportive of this project. So,
Question over there. Go ahead. The lady first. Go ahead.
Okay. Karen Batt for the Huffington Post. Your wonderful movie starts with the phonograph spinning, one of the first shots. So we know it's clearly a tribute to the arts throughout the film. So I'm not going to ask about that because you've already mentioned that. But I was curious about your own personal relationship to some of the books and the music that are in the film, if you have any personal favorites. And a second question is, I know your brother made a documentary about, I believe, Detroit. It was in Ohio.
Cleveland, actually.
Cleveland, yeah. So I was wondering, what is your relationship to Detroit? If you could be more specific about your relation, because I know your brother's relationship to Cleveland. Thank you.
Wow, what was the first
The
part?
first one was your favorite books
yes,
and music in the film.
This I can't possibly tell you because they're all threaded throughout the film. So they all mean something to me. They're all chosen. They're not there they're not randomly there. So they are all decisions made, references in the film. So they should speak for themselves. And as far as Detroit, I grew up in Northeast Ohio, Akron, Ohio, Cleveland, near Cleveland. And Detroit was always a kind of mysterious, magical city, the sort of Paris of the Midwest. My parents, when I was very, very young, they would go to Detroit because you would buy a car and you would order the car you wanted and the color you wanted. And then it's not very far from Cleveland. It's 3-4 hours drive, but they would go there to get the new car every 6 years or something, and they would stay overnight in Detroit, and it was a big deal, Detroit, you know? And if you see what has happened to it, it is really shocking, tragic, and very moving. So, but also Detroit is an incredible musical culture, too. So much of amazing American music comes from Detroit and continues to. So there's a great spirit in that place. And even now, there's a quite amazing spirit, but it's a kind of decimated city.
The gentleman behind the Huffington Post lady.
Alexander Sancho-Rauschel, Radio Dreieckland, Germany. I'm very grateful to be able to see the film yesterday. The music is so important in the film. You just mentioned it. It's like an actor in itself. I try to respect your wish to not analyze the movie, but of course I'm interested a bit in the strategy you've chosen for choosing the music. I've seen that you were involved in producing the music yourself, so maybe you could just tell me a bit about your personal link to the music you've chosen, or a bit. There's so much different music in it. Maybe you could just explain a little bit the choices, your strategy in it. Thank you.
Well, also, I don't want to discourage anyone from analyzing the film. Just, I don't want you to ask me to. So, well, yeah, the music's very, very important. First, the centerpiece of the music is Joseph van Vissem, who is a composer, a lutenist, a guitar player, avant-garde composer, a historian of certain types of music, particularly the history of music for the lute. But he's also has a avant-garde and rock and roll side. There's a lot of things inside him. So he's our center for the music. And then Carter Logan and myself and Shane Stoneback, we have a band called Squirrel. We then collaborated with Joseph or added things to the music. So we kind of co-created some of it, him being the leader of this. And then we also have the amazing original song of Yasmin Hamdan, who is someone I have incredible admiration. I've been a fan of her music. I saw her perform some years ago in Morocco, and I just couldn't believe this amazing creature, you know, this musician. So we have those things in the film, and then some, you know, some music that pre-existed. Particularly, we love Denise LaSalle's R&B track, "Trapped by This Thing Called Love," that they dance to as a kind of reconciliation at a point in the film. But yeah, I don't know. Music's always very, very important to me, and it's very important in this film. And of course, yeah, we have the opening track to "Funnel of Love" by Wanda Jackson that we did a kind of remix of that. So we changed it quite a bit, but kept some of the original tracks in there as well.
Question over there, then gentleman.
But also, you know, one of the main characters is a musician, so it's there's a lot of things about music in the film.
Hi, Brian Johnson from Maclean's magazine in Canada. Speaking of musicians, I've always assumed that David Bowie was a vampire, and until you did that wonderful video with David Bowie recently, and I don't know which came first, this movie or that, but I'm wondering if one might have informed the other, and I just want to know what your particular views are on the meaning, the beauty, the mystique of what's your connection to vampires?
Well, it feels like it's hard to know when things happen and what predates what, really. Sometimes it feels like everything's happening at the same time. In kind of real dog years, we made this film last year, and Bowie and I made that film with Floria Sigismondi earlier this one, so yeah. But I always feel like we made that Bowie video about 10 years ago somehow, I don't know. Vampires, why are we so fascinated by them? I suppose because they live these long, potentially never-ending lives. And we're all so terrified of thinking about mortality that we'd rather think about being immortal. And there's something about the way they live in the kind of wainscoting of life. They're in the backwaters. And I think one of the things that I love in this film is the sort of the idea of invisible lives, invisible work, unclaimed work, or that feeling of making work and not wanting it to go out in the world, but just putting it out into the ether somehow. I think that's that whole idea of invisibility and yet existing invisibly is really beautiful. And it was, I think, as you said, it was always coming, this film, for Jim somehow. I was never surprised when Jim said to me, let's make a vampire film. I mean, I felt like saying you've been making vampire films for years. It feels a very, very natural state, that sort of invisible, immortal world. I wouldn't know what that is. I'm much, much happier and more akin to the invisible state.
What was your approach to the whole mystique of vampires, Tom? And what was your take on the part when it was offered to you? Not necessarily in that order.
Adam, and the story as it was presented to me was such a fascinating prospect, because it was so it was such an exciting extension of curiosity into an avenue I'd never really explored. I had been playing a lot of soldiers and superheroes, and it was I'd always been a huge fan of Jim and of Tilda, and the idea of playing a character who somehow embodied a romanticism and a melancholy, but was still motivated by a curiosity towards the things that he loved. And I feel that Adam is someone who is fascinated by two separate things which are twinned, which are music and science. He is enamored of vibrating particles, and if that, they might be stringed instruments, they might be stars. And he's so passionate about these things, and he's such a brilliant musician and a brilliant engineer, but in a way he can't see that. And Eve is almost broader than he is, and she can hold his fragility, and it just was a very beautiful story between two people who loved each other and accepted each other, and they happened to be vampires. And the idea of exploring love in a context of immortality. If you are challenged with immortality, is that a blessing? Is it a curse? And what does that do to your commitment?
Wow. The lady here. Okay, you gentlemen, you have the microphone. Go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Kaya Burgess from The Times in London. Two sort of quick questions. First is, Jim, was it a conscious decision to have such a strongly British cast? It felt like almost like a sort of with Nail and I with vampires. Was there something about darkness of the film that you thought would be best portrayed by Brits in some way? And then a question to Tom, Tilda and John. In a year without kind of British film, so to speak, in competition at Cannes, do you feel a bit like sort of flying the flag for the British film in the competition?
Well, the first question, yes, very definitely a kind of British intention. It comes from, really, it came from the fact that primarily, at least to my knowledge, vampire stories as a literary form come from the Romantic poets directly and come from English literature, although there are certainly Central European mythologies and some German vampire stories. But for me, it comes from really this first story that Byron initiated and was then written by John Polidori. Then there was, of course, Bram Stoker, but this kind of connection to the Romantics and to particularly something British that was iconoclastic, or those people, their perceptions of literature and of the world was something very exceptional that still affects our perceptions. So, yeah, it was a strong intention for a kind of British undercurrent to these vampires.
John? About flying the flag.
Say John. It's very interesting because just listening to that, because I can genuinely say that it never occurred to me what nationality it was. I make a film for Jim, you make a film for Jim, and I don't even think of him as an American.
Thank you.
I mean, he is who he is, and that's the way he operates, that's the way it works, and the way I think it works with all of us who work with him. So you know what I feel about British film. I'm very concerned by it, and so on. But I never ever felt that I was flag waving here.
Sir, and then the lady here. Go ahead.
This is Parviz Johed from Iran. My question is to Mr. Jim Jarmusch. I realize that there are lots of references to literary figures and literatures in your film, but you mentioned that most of them are European literature. But I wonder if you are anyhow connected to a book called Laylo and Leyle, which is referred to as the name of the cafe that the part of the film take place in it.
You mean the Mille
Arabian Nights. Is there any connection between your films, especially The Limits of Control and this film, to that book in anyhow? Thank you.
No, I'm not familiar with the book, actually. So what was the book?
Oh, it's 1001 Nights.
Oh, well, yeah. Of course. I thought you said Layla.
Because there is another name for that film.
That's the Arabic name.
Yes. Oh, I see. Yes, well, it was also a reference to a cafe that existed in Tangier called 1001 Nights in the 50s. Brian Geisen, who is someone, an American. Is he, or was he British? Brian Geisen. Anyway, an amazing artist. He did a lot of collaborations with William Burroughs, cut-ups, and he invented the Dream Machine and different things. So it was more of a reference from Brian Geisen, who I believe was an American expatriate living in Tangier in the 50s, when Tangier was the interzone. So, but the book, that's an amazing book of yes, it's a beautiful existing book of literature, beautiful form, beautiful stories, and a beautiful structure. So, but it was more a particular reference to the Geisen Cafe.
Ma'am, Chaz.
Thank you, Chaz Ebert from RogerEbert.com. My question is for Tilda and Tom, and Jim if he wants to, but he probably doesn't want to answer it. I loved these vampires. They are something that you haven't seen in a movie before, and I wondered how you worked up the performance of the characteristics, because usually the vampires usually have to go out at night to get their prey, and Jim answered that, but in the writing of it, some of the, the things that their love story was so beautiful. One of the things that I also appreciated about these vampires, when you see vampires who've lived centuries, usually they are so uninformed, but you were informed about things, you had interest, and even when you noticed the interior of the guitar. So many things that you just haven't seen in a vampire movie before. But then I have a question about something very specific too. Why do they always have to cover their mouths? Because I didn't see anything about their mouths that would have given them away as vampires. And also, what was the thing with the hands and the gloves?
That was about 17 questions, but...
Well done.
I mean, when I first met Jim and he explained that the story of the film to me, it seemed that these were two very sophisticated creatures. And that perhaps if you saw them walking on the other side of the street, they'd stand out. But they'd stand out as kind of wild and feral, but in a beautiful way.
It depends on the street.
It does, yeah. Yeah, it depends if you're in Detroit or Tangier. But I suppose they know things because they've been around and they're curious. That's, what do you think?
Well, they're also not human. They're animal. We talked a lot about them being wolves. There's a heartbeat in the film, which is in fact a wolf's heartbeat. There's a feeling of... there's a beautiful luxury about approaching this sort of portrait because they are... You can come with a Martian's eye view and you can go, what do we want to make here? We're making a new creature. We knew that we needed to show a long love that had been, like all long loves, so evolved that what they actually say to each other is the tip of an iceberg of a conversation they've been having for 500 years. And that was very interesting, whipping that up. You know, so often there's this danger that you have people who say they've been together for a long time, and yet they're talking with a slight formality, like they have to explain each other to each other. And we wanted very much to show a couple who are trying to stay together, actually. Trying to live, obviously, but also trying to live and stay together. And that was an interesting kind of cat's cradle that we had to drum up.
And they cover their mouths because they have some pretty intense teeth, I guess.
And what's with the gloves?
Oh, well, the gloves was just, you know, we had this, as I say, we came with our Martian's eye view. We were able to create our own lexicon, our own series of traditions, our own series of vampire lore. And so we had this etiquette around our hands being covered and there being this moment when you're invited into someone's house. You have to be invited into another vampire's house and they take your gloves off for you. It's just another planet.
Yeah, because all these mythologies, they come kind of arbitrarily throughout vampire lore, garlic, reflection in silver or a silvered mirror, the cross, all of these things. But it's funny, if you study vampire films, the first time any fangs are even visible in a vampire film isn't until the 1950s in a Mexican film, El Vampiro. And, but this is not true in Nosferatu or Vampire or even Count Dracula, the Universal film with Bela Lugosi. So these things change, so we wanted to have one that was our own. So we had the gloved hands thing. And I like very much in a scene where Anton Yelchin, they're in a rock club, and he tries to, you know, he says something like, wow, you guys got such cool gloves. Like, where do you get them? And there's no answer at all. He gets no answer. So they just look cool.
But, you know, I wasn't really joking when I said it depends what street you go on, they would stick out. I know many streets that, you know, they would be, you know, really at home. And for some people, this is a vampire film. For some people, it's a fairy story. And for other people, it's a documentary.
So go ahead, sir.
Hello, it's Lutz Meyer from Stern.de website in Germany. I have a question for... It's here. In the middle.
There you are.
Hi.
I'm sorry. I have a question for Jim Jarmusch as well as two producers. Why did it last 7 years to produce and to develop the film? Is it particularly long for your films, or is it normal? And what were the difficulties you were speaking about to overcome? And maybe you can give us some more details of the financing of the film. So how was putting the money in it? Who was putting the money in it? And how long did you have to convince them to do that? But especially it's on the difficulties. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's really a producer's question. The reason it took so long was because no one wanted to give us the money. So it was very difficult. It took a very long time to put it together. It's getting more and more and more difficult now for films that are maybe a little unusual or not predictable or, I don't know, not satisfying people's expectations of something, which is the beauty of cinema, is discovering new things of all forms. So why it took so long? Boy, I wish I had an answer, but it's because there weren't enough people who wanted to help us make the film. It took a long time. I mean, Reinhardt was there from the beginning trying, but it didn't really work out until we finally got our team together and Jeremy came in, and then we finally were able to do it. So,
Right. Do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think it was 7 years, and Jim also had other ideas, other scripts, which were at that time easier to finance, Broken Flowers, and there were American companies who were very keen on working with him, and they were 100% financing his movies, and now the past 3 years we have a different situation. I think everywhere, it's not only in the States, and in Europe we still have this wonderful system of subsidies, and still some TV stations who are co-producing. So we found a way to do a European co-production with UK, with Cyprus, with France, some like France and Pandora and Germany were constantly collaborators on Jim's movies.
What was the budget?
The budget was around 7 million, and yeah, the majority came from Germany, but also, as I said, from UK, France, and Cyprus. So it's always it's a long journey. It's to put everything together.
Question here.
Giovanna Grassi, Corriere della Sera, to Jarmusch. I always admired your style, your visual architecture of each sequence. In the movie is nominated more than once time YouTube. Are you watching YouTube? What do you think of YouTube and all the video on YouTube?
I love YouTube.
I was thinking, but I wanted to hear from you.
I love YouTube. I love the idea that you can go on there and I can watch a performance from the 50s of Merle Haggard, and then I can watch a lecture on mycology and mushroom identification by John Cage, and then I can go and watch some, you know, a clip of a TV show, the Steve Allen Show, with the young Frank Zappa playing a bicycle as a musical instrument, or the amount, or oh, it's just so many incredible things. You can see how in slow motion, how a flying squirrel physically moves through space, or I don't know. I love YouTube, and I'm so bored with normal television delivering you things with commercials, and I like to program my own input. So YouTube is fantastic.
Now, speaking about the dialogue, Jim, most of us who are familiar with your films, kept thinking, he can't go more deadpan than that. And yes, one notch you go, constantly, to the point that, and I understand the English question, at some point only Brits could deliver the dialogue that way. And since last night on Twitter, you have quotes flying from your film. First one out the gate was, "It definitely was visual."
That's a good one. I like, "Please feel free to piss in the garden."
And as a Frenchman, I must say I was very flattered that the film ended on a question in French, which was, "Excusez-moi." So it seems appropriate to end the press conference with merci.
Merci.
Thank you very much for being here.